What's going on, everybody? Cleopas Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the OnePlus Nord N300 5G and the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro 5G. Now, as always, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description where I will be linking to several other videos about each of them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we're getting a 6.56-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 269, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. With the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, we're getting a 6.82-inch IPS LCD display. This one also has a 720p resolution, a PPI of 263, and a 20.5:9 aspect ratio. So for what they are, both phones do have pretty decent displays here. With 720p resolutions, they have pretty much the same image quality, not really the greatest, especially if you're going to be watching lots of videos and stuff like that. In that case, I would recommend going for something that has a 1080p resolution. But for more basic activities, I mean, they look okay, so I can't really complain too much. The only difference when it comes to image quality is that with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, this phone does have a 90Hz refresh rate versus the standard 60Hz with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro. And this is going to make the movement on the screen a little bit faster and smoother. So in general, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is going to feel a little bit more premium to use, but honestly, I don't really notice the difference too much, so it's definitely not something I'd base a decision on. On the other hand, with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, the advantage this phone has is a bit more significant. At 6.82 inches versus 6.56, the Revvl 6 Pro is clearly larger, so if you're doing stuff like reading and web browsing, for example, you're probably going to get a slightly better experience with the Revvl 6 Pro. And with a 20.5:9 aspect ratio versus 20:9, the Revvl 6 Pro also has a slightly taller and more narrow form factor. So again, if you're doing stuff like reading, web browsing, social media, with this kind of form factor, you can fit more content on the screen without having to scroll as much. Now, when it comes to storage, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we're getting 64GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, we're getting 128GB with microSD card expansion as well. So the Revvl 6 Pro clearly has an advantage here. With 128GB, that's double the space of the OnePlus Nord N300 5G. So if you're someone who's maybe constantly downloading apps and games and stuff like that, or maybe you just never want to have to worry about storage, in that case, the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro is probably going to be a better choice. But on the other hand, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G with 64GB, this isn't really that bad. And for the average user, as long as you're mindful of what you're putting on your phone, the storage we're getting with this phone is at least going to be acceptable. Now for security features, both phones do have Face Unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners right here on the power keys. So definitely a good spot. But starting with the OnePlus, let's give them a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the Revvl 6 Pro. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both fingerprint scanners were real fast and responsive. And again, both phones do have Face Unlock too, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now for the camera setups, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we got a water drop notch for the front-facing camera. In fact, actually for that matter, both phones do. And both cameras are 16 megapixels. Then on the back, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we got a dual camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. With the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, we got a quad camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So in general, as far as features go, clearly the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro does have a huge advantage here, having both an ultra wide camera and a macro camera, whereas with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, unfortunately this phone has neither. That being said though, I will say, when it comes to actual photo quality, it's a completely different story. Now if you want to see actual detailed photo and video samples, definitely check out my full camera reviews for each phone. By the time you're watching this video, I know the one for the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro is going to be out, and the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is probably going to be coming soon. But regardless, I will be linking to both in the video description as they come out. But to give you a quick idea of what these phones' cameras can do, here's a photo taken with the main camera of the OnePlus Nord N300 5G. Definitely great quality, especially considering this phone is barely over $200. So for what you're paying, even though this phone doesn't really have a ton of camera features, I feel like the actual image quality itself definitely makes up for it. On the other hand, here's a photo taken with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, and don't get me wrong, it's not really bad. And in a lot of situations, it's probably going to be just fine if you're taking more casual photos and videos for stuff like social media, vacation photos, or stuff you want to keep for your own memories. In that kind of situation, the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro is going to be perfectly fine too. But again, compared to the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, I feel like it's safe to say the camera quality with the OnePlus is clearly better. So in general, between the two, when it comes to photos, on one hand, if you want the best image quality between the two and you don't really care that much about features, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is probably going to be a better choice for you. But on the other hand, if you do want an ultra-wide camera and a macro camera, and you're not really as concerned about the image quality, then in that case, the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro is still going to be a better choice. When it comes to video, keep in mind, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we get a max recording quality quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, but with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, this phone actually has a max recording quality of 2K in the rear camera and then 1080p in the front. So overall, I don't really think 2K is that useful, but of course, if you want to record videos in a slightly better resolution than 1080p, the Revvl 6 Pro will have an advantage, but otherwise, again, just like with the photos, I feel like overall in terms of quality, things are going to look better on the OnePlus. Now when it comes to RAM and processor, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 810 processor. With the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 700. Now as far as the actual performance goes, you're not really going to see a huge difference between the two. I mean, they're pretty much around the same level. Neither phone is really slow per se, especially for more basic activities, but compared to more mid-range phones, of course, neither of them is going to be that fast. So overall, if you're really looking for an affordable phone that has decent performance, but you're not going to really be doing anything extravagant on it, either phone will get the job done just fine. Now I did run benchmark tests on both phones using Geekbench 5, and here are the results I got. So as you can see, again, there's not a huge difference. Technically the OnePlus did score a tiny bit higher, but in the grand scheme of things, in my experience, you're really not going to see a huge difference. So I guess technically if you want the faster phone between the two, then you are going to want to go with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G. But honestly, again, the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro 5G for what it is really isn't far behind. Both phones are really meant for more basic activities, and for entry-level phones, they are a little bit on the faster side. So in general, if you're looking for an entry-level 5G phone for stuff like web browsing, social media, watching videos, maybe some light gaming and stuff like that, in that kind of situation, both phones are going to be perfectly fine. Now for the batteries, both phones have 5000 mAh batteries, but there are two major differences here. On one hand, when it comes to charging, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G supports 33 watt fast charging, whereas the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro only supports 15. So that's a huge difference, and let me tell you from experience, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G charges up really fast. So if you have a good fast charger, which this phone actually does come with, and charging speed is more important to you, then this is definitely going to be a great thing for you. On the other hand though, with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, this phone actually does support wireless charging, which the OnePlus Nord N300 5G doesn't. And in this price range, this is definitely more of a rare feature. It's not really unheard of per se, but very few phones that aren't flagship phones have wireless charging. So if that is something you want, then definitely keep this in mind. But in general, between the two advantages, I would definitely say the OnePlus Nord N300 5G's charging outweighs the wireless charging, because in my experience, even with such a large battery, this charging speed definitely does make a difference. But aside from those differences, again, both phones do have 5000 mAh batteries, so if battery life is important to you, then either phone is going to be a great choice. Now when it comes to software, both phones do currently have Android 12, but with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, seeing as this is more of an entry-level carrier branded phone, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be getting any major updates, whereas with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, although I'm personally still not counting on updates, I feel like between the two, if either of these phones is going to get Android 13, it's most likely going to end up being the OnePlus Nord N300 5G. Either way though, if having the latest version of Android is important to you, neither of these phones is going to be a great choice, considering pretty much every Samsung Galaxy A series phone has Android 13 at this point. But if you don't really care that much about having the latest version of Android and you just want something decent that works, either phone is going to be perfectly fine. Another thing I do want to point out is that both phones do have NFC, so if you like to make contactless mobile payments using tap and pay, keep in mind either phone can do this no problem. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? In general, this is kind of a tough one because in a lot of ways, they're pretty much the same. I would choose the OnePlus Nord N300 5G. I feel like with the design, materials, and again, the camera, this phone is just made a little bit better, and I guess when it comes to performance, it does have a tiny advantage too. On the other hand though, I feel like objectively, when it comes to individual advantages, the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro does have a slight majority here. For the display, it is significantly larger and has a better aspect ratio, despite the image quality being pretty much the same. And remember, the Revvl 6 Pro also has double the storage. It also has more features, including an ultra-wide camera and a macro camera. It can record 2K videos, whereas the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is limited to 1080p. And the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro does have wireless charging too. But again, remember, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G does have way better fast charging, so if you do care about charging speeds, that is another thing to keep in mind. But in general, despite their differences, if you're looking for an entry-level 5G phone that has really good performance, a decent display, a good camera, and a really large battery, either phone is going to be a great choice. But this concludes my comparison between the OnePlus Nord N300 5G and the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro 5G. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, don't forget to check out the description, where I will be linking to several other videos about each phone, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.